Welcome to the fifth planning meeting, a planning building environmental meeting. I'm William Riley. I'll be the chair of tonight's meeting. Today is Monday, May 8th. It's 2023. We're starting a little earlier tonight than normal because we have a confidential matter to address. At this point, I'm going to just look around the horseshoe here to see if there's any disclosure of pecuniary interest and or conflict of interest. Not seeing or hearing any. I'm going to go down to the confidential recommendation that the next portion of this meeting be closed to the public to consider the following pursuant to Section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001. And it's Director of Planning and Building Brian Trouble. It's a legal solicitor client privilege, Ontario Land Tribunal, Helen Kazan, file number 22-00280, and we're just receiving a verbal update. The applicable closed session exemptions are advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. So I'm going to need someone to move that for me. I got Mayor Ganan and Councillor Bell. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, that carries. We are officially closed. We'll be back. Okay.
I can't get it.
Bringing us back into open here, it is at the hour of 6:20. I'm going to get, so I guess the recommendation is that committee now resumes in open session at this hour. I need a mover and seconder. We got Councilor Chichuk and Councilor Braderick. All those in favor? We are now officially open. At this point, it was a verbal update under legal solicitor client privilege matter, OLT, file number 22-00280. And that the motion is the Township of West Lincoln solicitor, be and is hereby authorized to proceed as directed in closed session with respect to legal solicitor client matter relating to the Ontario Land Tribunal, OLT matter, and it's Helen Kazan, file number 22-00280. And I have a mover seconder, so all those in Oh, I already right, so, because that was to bring us into open. So then I'm going to need a mover, a seconder for this. So I have Councilor Bell and Councilor Braderick. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. So at this point, it is the hour 6:22. Our public meeting does not start till 6:30. So I'm going to recess us for 8 minutes, and we're going to let the gallery here fill up, and we'll see you all shortly. Welcome. I'm Councilor William Riley. I'll be the chair of tonight's meeting. Note to members of the public that all those, especially those who are here in the chambers with us, all cell phones, pagers, and or PDAs are to be turned off. Members of the public who are attending and participating virtually are reminded to keep their microphones muted until they are acknowledged to speak. Additionally, for your information, please be advised that this meeting will be live streamed as well as recorded and will be available on the township website usually within the next 24, 48 hours. So I'm going to also go and say that comments can be made from members of the public for a matter that is on the agenda by advising the chair during the request to address an item on the agenda section on this agenda. The public may submit written comments for matters that are on the agenda to jdyson@westlincoln.ca before 4:30 on the day of a meeting. Comments submitted will be considered as public information and will be read into the public record. And thirdly, this meeting, as I already noted, will be live streamed and recorded and available on the township website. So I'm just going to move forward here to our land acknowledgement statement. The Township of West Lincoln, being a part of the Niagara region, is situated on treaty land. This land is steep in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hattawinawak, the Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The Township of West Lincoln, as part of the regional municipality of Niagara, stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. So again, I'm going to go around the horseshoe here to see if there's any pecuniary and or conflict of interest. Not seeing or hearing any. We have 2 public meetings tonight. I'm going to go forward with our first public meeting. It's amendment to zoning bylaw. So this is a public meeting to consider a zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by Stephen Rivers of South Coast Consulting, agent on behalf of 910-9072 Canada Inc. And Raf Servo, owner for 5623 20 Mile Road, file number 1601-011-23. I must state that the Planning Act requires in section 3412 that before passing a zoning bylaw amendment, council must hold at least 1 public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the amendment. The purpose of this public meeting is to receive comments and answer questions from the public regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. We stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendment, and any comments received will be taken into account by council in their consideration. I must also state that the Planning Act requires through section 3413 that council advise the public that if a person or public body does not make an oral submission at the public meeting or make a written submission to the Township of West Lincoln before the bylaw is passed, that person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of council for the Township of West Lincoln to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So at this point, I'm going to ask our Deputy Clerk to please advise the method and dates by which notice of the public meeting was given.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Proper notice was given by way of email and mail circulation to agencies and neighboring properties on April 11th, 2023. Additionally, a notice sign was also placed on the property on April 12th, 2023.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask our senior planner, Shadra, if you could please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment.
For rezoning has been made by Mr. Stephen Rivers of South Coast Planning Consultants on behalf of 910-9072 Ontario Inc. Mr. Raf Servo for an agricultural property municipally known as 5623 20 Mile Road, located on the north side of 20 Mile Road, Regional Road 69, west of Hamlet of St. Ains and south of the CP rail line. The application proposes to rezone the entire 0.27 hectare of land from agricultural to agriculture-related zone AR to permit an agriculture-related use, specifically being an agricultural service and supply establishment, providing tractor, tire, sales, and service. The current zoning bylaw does not permit an agriculture-related use within an agricultural zone. The application also requests that the agriculture-related use be permitted on the lot with reduced lot area of 0.25 hectares and the existing lot area is 0.27 hectares, whereas zoning bylaw requires a minimum lot area of 0.40 hectares for the agriculture-related zone. Additionally, they have also requested a reduction in the front yard setback to 10 meters from the required 30 meters from the AR zone. The property appears to have been historically used as a salvage yard. Currently, the structures on the site have been demolished and the site has been gravelled. A preliminary review of the agricultural policies outlined in the PPS, the Provincial Growth Plan, Regional Official Plan, and the Township Official Plan has been done, which allows for agriculture-related uses with specific criteria mentioned in detail in the report. Staff is still reviewing the application with respect to the policies, and the applicant explains that the proposed intended use is related to farm-related commercial use compatible with surrounding agricultural operations, which is directly related to farms in the area, supports agriculture, provides service to the farms, benefiting from proximity to farms in a prime agricultural area. The applicant further explains the proposed use does not hinder surrounding agricultural operations. Staff again would request an example of a similar type of operation that operates within an agricultural area to understand how this proposal meets the requirements of the policy that explains the proposed use that does not hinder surrounding agricultural operation. The Township, Building Department, Public Works Department have no comments at this time, and the Niagara region do not have any objection to the proposed application. Staff has received 2 public comments from the neighbors. These comments are concerned about the service-related aspect to be operated, related noise generated with probable use of air guns to install tires, hours of operation, lighting, and increase in farm equipment, traffic noise, and fumes. The concerns have been sent to the applicant to be addressed. Overall, the staff is still reviewing the application, and recommendation report will be prepared for a future committee meeting. Just to clarify, the decision date for the 90 days would be resulting in the day of July 3rd, 2023. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point, I'll ask if the applicant or their authorized agent is present. Please come forward. You're just going to state your name and address for the record, and then you can proceed with your presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Stephen Rivers. I am a member of the Canadian Institute of Planners and a registered professional planner in Ontario. My address is 189 Clare Avenue, Port Colborne, Ontario.
Perfect, thank you.
Summary of what's being proposed. As your staff has pointed out, we're requesting a rezoning from the agricultural A zone to the agricultural related AR zone to permit an agricultural service and supply establishment with 4 employees in a approximately 225 square meter building. Normal business hours, 9 to 5, 9 to 4, 8 to 4, on a 0.27 hectare lot, which is an existing parcel, fronting on 20 Mile Road, adjacent to the rail line. The business will be selling new and used tractor tires. We have commissioned reports and examinations for the installation of a Class 4 septic system for washrooms, and we're looking at a reduced front yard setback and recognizing the existing lot area. I'm going to go off script a little bit. I have spoken at length with the owner, and the way the business operates is basically it operates out of the trucks right now, so there's no requirement for a location. So they will receive calls from farmers and from businesses saying we have a tractor tire, we have tires for disposal. They'll pick them up and take them to a recycling facility in Brantford. Having gone through the business since 2008, they realized that there's a potential business opportunity available for reselling some of the used tractor tires. Not all farmers require or want new tires, so that would be the reason for looking at this particular location to operate the business out of. There would be some storage of used tires, but any, as in the past, any tires that aren't resellable will be immediately taken to the recycler in Brantford. And Mr. Servo has relationships with new tire dealers as well. If somebody puts in an order for a new tire, he'll check with the seller in the inventory, pick the tire up, take it to the farm, or bring it to the site for installation on the tractor. All of the work will be on farm equipment and farm equipment only. Somebody brings the tractor in, have a new tire put on, they'll grease the fittings, change the oil, check, maybe replace some of the hydraulic lines. That, in a nutshell, is how the business will operate. And as I say, it's a new opportunity that Mr. Servo has realized that there's a market for. Most of the work presently and most likely in the future will be in the Niagara Peninsula, in the Niagara region. This location suits the business because the employees all live in the St. Catharines Welland area, and rather than look at a location in Brantford or Hamilton, it's better for them to come to this location. Mr. Servo lives in the township. It's a quick picture of the proposal. The building located in the southwest corner, septic system located in the northern part of the property, parking adjacent to the rail line, and the access or potential new access, again, adjacent to the rail line, and that'll be subject to approval by the Region of Niagara for its location and be dealt with through the site plan. The issues that have been brought up are related to noise. The shop doors for the property will open to the east, and the distance to the nearest dwellings are from the building itself. In the southwest is 145 meters. In the west, southwest being across the road, obviously. In the west, 220 meters. To the east, 145 meters. And to the southeast, 335 meters. There was concerns about traffic. We're probably, given the nature of the business, we're looking at an additional 15 to 20 trips a day on a straight, flat, paved road with no hills. And there was concern about the speed of traffic in that location, and certainly my client has absolutely no issue with having that speed reduced to 60 kilometers an hour, if that would be appropriate. There were also concerns about lighting and lights. The lights on the property will be motion sensor lights for security purposes only, and there will be only evening work if it's an emergency issue with a local farm. The existing parcel is 0.27 hectares with about 80 meters frontage on 20 Mile Road. As your planner has pointed out, it's a former scrapyard. It's designated good agriculture in the OP and zoned agricultural. That is an image of the existing parcel. The railway to the north and east of the property is basically triangular. The surrounding land uses are primarily agricultural, and the zoning and official plan designations reflect those uses. The planning considerations that I've considered and your staff have and will continue to consider are the implications of the Planning Act, the provincial policy statement, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the Niagara Region official plan, the Township of West Lincoln official plan, and the Township of West Lincoln zoning bylaw. As for the provincial policy statement, the agricultural surface and supply establishment use complies with policy 1.1.4.1, in my opinion, by supporting a healthy and integrated viable rural area, regenerating and redeveloping a brownfield, efficient use of existing rural infrastructure and public services, diversifying of the economic base of the township, and providing economic activities in the prime agricultural area. For the growth plan, the agricultural service and supply establishment use is compatible with the rural landscape and surrounding local land uses, is sustainable by rural service levels, it will not adversely affect protection of agricultural uses. From the regional plan objectives, it preserves agricultural land by not removing land from agricultural production. It conserves natural resources of the rural area by not encroaching on natural heritage features. It's limited non-farm development in a rural area. It's efficient and orderly pattern of land use in rural areas which has no land use conflicts and no municipal services are required. Further, there are no conflicts between the farm and non-farm uses. Farm diversification uses is in this case in an appropriate location at a scale suitable to the farm and the agricultural area and contributes to profitable and economically sustainable agriculture. From the township plan, it's directly related to agriculture and benefits from a rural location. It's limited scale of operation. There's no impact, and it does not interfere with and is compatible with agricultural uses. There are no off-site impacts, including impacts related to infrastructure or transportation. It's a low water and low effluent producing use on site where water and waste disposal can be provided. There's no additional public infrastructure required. Does not hinder the agricultural operations on the site, there are none, or in the surrounding land. There's no requirement for improvements to utilities or infrastructure such as roads or hydro services, and it complies with the policies, the official plan, and the regional official plan. Zoning relief requested is a creation of a permitted use, add site-specific agriculture services and supply establishment to the property through a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment, and reduce the minimum lot size to recognize the existing lot and the reduced lot frontage to accommodate the location of the building and the septic system. Again, the zoning requirements related to the minimum lot area. It's an existing lot, it's undersized, it's a minor reduction in the requirement, there's adequate water and septic possible, and there's no negative impact. And reduction of the front yard, also there is no negative impact from that. In my opinion, the request conforms with the provisions of the Planning Act, the provincial policy statement, the growth plan, the regional official plan, and the official plan. It permits an agricultural service and supply establishment use. It's good planning, and council can be confident the zoning bylaw amendment is consistent with the township's official plan and the regional and provincial policies. I'd be happy to try and answer any questions you may have.
Perfect, thank you. So I'll park that right there. I'm gonna go to public submissions first, and we'll just keep you right there, so if questions come up, then we can refer them back to you. So I'm going to ask members of the public, are there any oral written submissions from anyone present in this meeting, either in person or virtually, which we'll go to in a second, regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? I would like to stress that this may be the only public meeting held with respect to this application. Therefore, if any members of the public that are in attendance at this public meeting would like to make comments and or provide written comments, they should do so now. If you are attending virtually and would like to provide comments, you can do so by using one of the two options. If you're using a computer or smartphone, you're going to raise your hand, which can be found in the Zoom controls on your screen. Or if you've called in with a landline, you're going to hit *9, and that will notify staff that you've raised your hand. Once you've been acknowledged to speak, please unmute your microphone. It is important to provide your comments now. If you have not done so in writing or verbally, as LLT, which is also known as the Ontario Land Tribunal, may not consider comments made during any other council and or committee meeting. Also, anyone wishing to speak are required to unmute the microphone, and then when they finish, we ask that you remute your microphone so we don't hear the background noise. And then prior to speaking, I will ask for your name and address. So at this point, I'm going to go to IT just to confirm. I think last we looked, we didn't have anybody, but let's just see if we had anybody, last minute people. Okay, so there is one person there. If you'd like to provide a comment, you can raise your hand now. If not, I will go to the gallery here. Not seeing any, so I'm going to go to the gallery here. Anybody wishing to speak to this item, this is your chance now. Not seeing any, so I'm going to move forward to members of committee. Are there any members of committee who have any oral or written submissions on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? Please note that members of committee must make their comments now, as the Ontario Land Tribunal may not consider comments made at any other council and or committee meeting. Any member of council wishing to speak are required to unmute their microphone to talk, and then when you're done talking, I'll probably remind Councilor Rayner to unmute his microphone. So I have first Councilor Rayner, then Mayor Ganan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the Director of Planning. Brian, in the overview of this on the report, there's a number of bullets on report PD-22-2023. I'll read the fourth bullet. The application for zoning bylaw amendment has been submitted to permit an agriculture-related use, specifically being an agricultural service and supply establishment providing tractor, tire sales, and service, whereas the township zoning bylaw does not permit agriculture-related uses within an agricultural zone. The application requests to change the zone to agriculture-related AR to allow the agricultural services and supply establishment on the subject property. Through you to Mr. Treble. This says clearly the township bylaw does not permit agriculture-related uses. So why was this application made? I'm kind of looking like if you're driving down the road and there's a stop sign and you go through it, then you're going to be charged because you're not supposed to go through the stop sign. If it says does not permit agriculture-related, why is an application being made, and why isn't it stated that, I'm sorry, we can't do it because the township bylaw prohibits that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the policy is in the official plan to guide where and when service-type uses for agriculture can be permitted. We did not pre-zone for those types of uses. They have to come forward on a site-specific basis and ask for permission where they think would make sense. And so there's guidelines in the official plan that talk about being on a major road in the right sort of general area for the area that they intend to service, and those kind of provisions are in the official plan. So it's meant to be dealt with on a case-by-case basis where you apply the policy in a specific application.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Treble, but it says here in your bullet, though, the township zoning bylaw does not permit. It doesn't say unless applied. It just says does not permit, which means don't even ask.
Well, I would say, Councilor, that's not necessarily how that's always handled. We've had several applications come forward that have kind of fallen into the same scope. So they have the right to put the application forward, and they have the right to make their case, and should the council decide to support it or oppose it, that's a different matter, but I'll go to our...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The other piece is that there's policy that guides how to apply the zoning bylaw. So right now, this property is in an A zone that allows you to put your dairy barn on there. They want an AR zone, so they're going from a zone that doesn't permit it to a zone that does permit it, subject to policy guidance out of the official plan.
Through you to Mr. Treble, Mr. Chair, this is a former scrapyard. Was there any environmental issues related to this before this process has been started?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll start, but it might be that others will be able to get a little more detailed. I understand that if there's a change in use, that's what triggers a cleanup requirement. So if this property went from a wrecking yard to the actual growing of crops, it would be, in theory, a substantial cleanup that would be required because the growing of crops is some of the highest and cleanest quality lands out there. To go to another type of sort of commercial, if I can call it that, use, I don't believe triggers the cleanup requirements, or at least not in the same way. Having said all of that, though, if you walk into a bank, it's very possible a bank might be asking for cleanup. That's what happened, for example, to the car wash site that we've been waiting for forever. So Our policy, I don't think triggers it. The other piece that's relevant is the building code, and so our building inspector would have to be satisfied that if there's a requirement for cleanup, it's done at that point. Failing that, the mortgage company might still step in and say it needs to be cleaned. And I'm not aware that there's any record of site condition completed on this site. I don't know if the owners or someone might be able to clarify that, but I don't believe it's been cleaned up.
So through you, Mr. Chair, are you referring to a Phase 1 or Phase 2 environmental cleanup?
It's the record of site condition provisions under the Environmental Protection Act. I think it is the EPA. I'm not sure if that's Phase 1, Phase 2, or how that works, but.
Okay, one further comment if I have.
Go ahead.
Mr. Rivers has come here before. He's had 2 applications in one night a couple months ago. His general plan and how he lays it out on the board is pretty consistent. And it hasn't altered from what I've seen a few months ago. But he always has a line, is good planning. And it bothered me a few months ago, and I didn't say anything. But it's on there again tonight, so tonight is.
So Counselor, I'm going to stop you right there. If you have a question for the.
I have a statement to make.
I don't want to hear if you're going to
Well,
go
you don't
off
have
and
to hear it,
attack.
then I'll tell everybody else. You
No,
don't have
so
to
then that's fine. I'm going to cut you off at this point. I'm going to go to Mayor Ganan. Thank you.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I also have some questions about this property. So, one of the things that concerned me was whether the fact that it was a salvage yard, and then there was soil contamination, obviously because of that. And then I wondered about, and maybe it's through you, Mr. Chair, to the director, about whether there are any restrictions about another building being placed there, you know, based on the soil conditions, and then looking for a septic bed. Is that something of concern in terms of those requirements?
So before you answer that, it's brought to my attention, I have Councilor Rayner and Councilor Chichek's mics on, just IT's picking up some noise. Perfect, thank you. And then, Director, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we haven't made it to the site plan stage, but I think those kind of issues would be addressed as part of the site plan, making sure there's adequate area for septic and a solid base for a building to be established on the property. I'm not sure if there's rubble or what there might be in there, so we'd have to do some
Okay,
soil
so I
testing.
raise that issue to make sure that that is something that comes forward. I also wonder about, with the closeness to the rail line, is that something that we need to sort of address with CP in terms of what the expectations are now for that property? And is that something that needs to be looked at?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I know we would have circulated the rezoning to CP already, but certainly at the time of a site plan, they will be involved. One of the things I saw on the site plan that I'm pretty sure won't be accepted is the location of the proposed entrance to the property. There's a setback requirement, I think.
And that was one of the things that made me
Yeah.
wonder about whether they
Yeah.
needed to be approached about that at all.
So that will be part of site plan for sure.
Okay, thank you. So I have some other questions for Mr. Rivers. So, you know, you always manage to look very carefully at the regulations and the rules of each of the various components, whether it's the region or whether it's our own or whether it's provincial policy statement. And you address that. And that's what I expected to see when I read your report. I did notice, though, the beginning of this report also has a little bit of a caveat in terms of the fact that you are doing this based on what your clients have asked you to do and that you're responding to them. And then what really triggered an alarm for me as I read on is that there seemed to be more in your closing statement about third-party liability and the responsibilities there. And so I'm looking at page 17 onto page 18 of your report. And it says it is your professional work, and I appreciate that you've done that, and it shall remain the sole property of you, and that all makes sense. And then I got to the client shall defend, indemnify, and hold Stephen Rivers harmless from any liability arising from or related to the client's unauthorized distribution of the report. So you're still protecting yourself, and that's okay. But there's this thing about the third party. That would be the municipality, if we are to accept what's in this report. And it goes on to say that no other representations or warranties of any kind, either expressed or implied, are made. Any use which a third party makes of this report, or any reliance on or decisions made based on it, are the sole responsibility of such third parties. So from that, I take that if the municipality is looking at this report as being an accurate report, and I don't doubt that you've done your best in terms of judging against the statements, if anything has been told to you that is untrue or misleading in any way that led you to do this report, then that's on the third party, which would be our municipality, I would think, if we took this report as gospel. So with that in the back of my mind and being a little bit distrustful perhaps, I decided to look up the 9109072 Canada Inc. company, and I see that it looks to be, the key principal is Raf Servo, and is that? Yep. Thank you, I don't know, I'm guessing that may be you. Yeah. So as I look at that, and I started to look on different sites, it seemed to be that it is a company that is a sole ownership and has lived, you've lived in various locations, and so I see that that's where, depending what site I looked on, it showed that you were at 5414 Canberra, and then I saw that eventually the address of this 20-mile property is the property that's listed under the corporation. And I began to be a little bit concerned about that as I started to look at all of that. And so then I actually then did some more work and looked up a bit more, and I see that your current job is with RC Enterprise Tire Recycling. Yeah. And that raised an alarm bell for me, and I think it should for the municipality. I think that that's something that we need to look at very carefully, because the very last thing we would need is to have an issue with tire storage on that property. And so I'm just putting that out in the open now so that we're all very clear that although this planning report makes it look like that's a good use of that property, I think that that we just need to have some more investigation by staff into what's going on with that. I'm not trying to malign anybody. I'm just saying that there are some questions there. I looked at RC Enterprises and found a lot of different addresses, and most of those are homes or they are buildings with units. I did see on the Facebook site some photos of tire storage, but I could see no reference to that anywhere. So through you, Mr. Chair, to our applicant, are these tires that you're associated with in your other business being stored somewhere locally?
So before you answer, I'm going to ask you to come up just to the microphone, just so we can, and just have you state your name for the record, just so that way we have everything documented correctly, and then you can respond to the question.
Okay. Is this working now? Yeah. I'm Raf Servo.
Perfect, thank you.
Right. We don't store tires. We pick them up on a daily basis, and they go to a processing plant in Brantford. So we don't store.
So the photos, sir, on the Facebook site are somebody else's tires?
Yeah, it's possible, like a processing plant, taking pictures for like advertising and stuff like that, but it's not our site where we store tires. We don't want to store tires. We were like in the used tire transportation. We pick up the tires and bring them to the recycling plant to get processed.
So that's the only business, is moving those from place to place?
Moving the tires, that's right.
Okay, and so, so are you still then, if this new proposal were to go through, is it still your plan to work with that same company, with RC Enterprises, and use that facility, like their ability to move those tires? Please explain.
Yeah, no, this facility is exactly for what we're going for, agricultural related services. So because we can get our hands on good used tires and we have access to new tires, we want to sell them at this location. So that business is totally separate to what's going. You're
hoping that business will help you feed into the new one?
To the new business, exactly.
Okay. So at this point in time then, so all of those decisions need to be made, sir, through this planning process, which would give you that correct zoning. But what do you see as a protection then for West Lincoln residents not to be involved in this? Because one of the things I'm thinking is our fire department needs to be on board in terms of looking into this and investigating the possibility of tires on fire or something, and then you're close to the railway line, and I just see this as a potential disaster if it isn't handled appropriately. So
okay, yeah, we will store some tires on site, but it won't be anywhere in the thousands or anything like that. It might be 50, 100. Tractor tires are big, so they take up a lot of space.
They are big.
Yeah. So really there's not going to be a big volume of tires on site, and whatever's on site is good stuff to be sold.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just before I forget, sorry. Just before I forget, I did need your address just for the record because you spoke here. So I know we have your name, so if you could just state your address for our clerk.
No problem. It's 5414 Canberra Road, Welland Park.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and so, just so the rest of the committee knows, so I have Councillor Bell, Councillor Trombetta, Councillor Braderick, then Councillor Chichuk, so that's the order right now. So Councillor Bell, the floor is yours.
Mayor Gadan asked most of the questions. My big concern is tire storage. How many tires are you gonna have on site? I think it should be limited to what is stored on that piece of property.
Okay.
Like, we don't wanna turn it into another Hagersville.
Yeah, he just estimated, he just said approximately 50, so that could be, go back to staff to look at.
So are we going to be able to, are we gonna police that, or are we just gonna let it go at being gospel?
Okay, so is that question for the director?
It's for the director,
Sure, so,
Mr. Trouble.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's a couple of pieces I guess I can add. As I had stated earlier, the property will be subject to site plan control, so that requires the entering into of an agreement where we could probably spell out some of the detail around control and penalties and whatnot. The other thing that tends to be a provision with respect to these types of zones is limiting outdoor storage. So the limiting of outdoor storage will certainly restrict the ability for there to be a lot of tires on site as well. But I think site plan and the binding agreement would be our best mechanism at that point.
Yep, that's good, Joe.
okay, thank you. So I have Councillor Trombetta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just let me get to my points here. So, just to go through it, I know Brian in his report stated that, one second, let me just go to the conclusion here, Brian. Sorry, I lost my scroll point on this report. It's a long, lengthy report you wrote, Brian.
Do you want me to come back to you?
No, I'm here. I will be real close. It's just stated that it's not permitted in agricultural A zone and zoning amendment is required. So really it's them coming to you and then coming back to us to kind of say yes or no is what's happening here. So it's put on this council is sort of this application is what's happened at this moment. These came to me in the past, which we know. We've had some ones that have went good and some ones that have went really, really bad. This property, it's small, to show, and I know St. Anne's really well, not as probably as well as some of my counterparts at the table, but St. Anne's is we're trying to prevent these businesses from, not saying this client is going to make this, but we're trying to prevent these businesses coming and changing the landscape for these residents, and then we deal with the fallout like we've done in the past. So this is all new to me. Again, we get our reports on Friday, and we got to kind of review it through the weekend, Mr. Chair, and kind of come up with a decision. I seek sort of a plan, but I'm not comfortable with it yet, if I could be honest. I got like
So
the
what I would say is just keep in mind it's all that's being.
I understand.
It's a technical report.
I understand. So
there's no decisions tonight.
This is a first thing that came to, I guess, all us councillors on Friday, and the mayor makes some good points, and I need to see more of a business plan instead of saying, hey, we got this site, we're storing tires on it, and, afterwards we say yes, then we got to live with the fallout. So I'm just not comfortable with the plan at the moment, so I just wanted to put that out there that we've had these things in the past. We've accepted it, and we see even better plans, Mr. Rivers, come to us, and there's been a big fallout for this council. So at this moment, I know I understand it's a technical report, and we're just receiving a technical report this evening. I just need more
We'd like more information. Yeah, hopefully that can, okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry,
Director.
just 2 points. Shrada and our manager Dave will be doing a thorough review before our rec report comes back, and certainly the concerns that you guys are expressing tonight will be part of the evaluation matrix. The thing to keep in mind, and I know Trombetta or Councillor Trombetta is referring to this in a way, the rural employment park is kind of the concept where these things are supposed to go, so that we don't have the scattered development. This one's a little different in the sense that it has a history of non-farm use, and so it's been sitting idle. And I think there's been a number of different adventures and inquiries on this property. It actually went up for tax sale. A certain person we all know was involved in the purchasing of that property. And so it's had a bit of a long history. And so staff are interested in finding something that works, and I don't think it will ever be planting crops on this piece. Whether this is the right venture or not, I don't know that any of us know that just yet. But I know the rural employment park is where we want to try and direct them in the future. This is kind of an anomaly in my mind, so it's a one-off, really.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Broderick, and then I have Councillor Chichek.
Thank you, Chair. However, Councillor Turmbetta's comments kind of stole my thunder because I was going to ask about how it fit into the employment hamlet, employment lands. So I have no questions.
Thank you. Councillor Chichek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm listening very carefully to all people who speak on this matter, but I just don't feel like I'm getting the full story. And I'm very familiar with tractor tires. They're very large and not easy to move. And 50 tractor tires on a confined space like the one we're looking at, if we were to limit the storage of these on an inside basis only, would make it very impossible. And yet, I understand that the owner has, for some years now, had a tractor tire business, which we don't usually drive our tractor with the flat tire all the way to a tire dealer. We make them come to, well, we don't make them, we beg them to come to our place, and they have all the equipment there. So I'm struggling because this is a very small piece of land, and I'm sure that there are constraints. And I guess through you, Mr. Chair, to the appropriate person, our director, has the environmental cleanup been spec'd, or do we know anything about the environmental cleanup to what's there now before anything more happens?
Okay, I guess we're going to go to Mr. Rogers.
There's no current condition?
Yeah, I think that was mentioned earlier that there was currently nothing outstanding, but.
Sometimes I have to ask questions.
Oh, I get it. That was already asked earlier, so.
To the chair, to the councillor, the region hasn't requested a environmental site assessment for the property, and I concur with your staff that a change in land use from a industrial or commercial or scrapyard use to a industrial or commercial use doesn't normally trigger a requirement for environmental site assessment or a record of site condition. So it hasn't been requested.
So the short answer is no, we don't have one.
And the only other piece I can add through you, Mr. Chair, is I believe at the time of tax sale, it was sort of a buyer beware clause. So I don't think we had any verification one way or the other at that point.
So in Mr. Rivers' report, Mr. Chair, and through you, is the fact that this is a tire repair place, which may very well happen at the farms or agricultural areas where the tires are flat or needing new ones. But I heard also that it would be a changing of oil in tractors as well as hydraulic, and those being a hydraulic and engine oil. So what could we understand as the storage? I understand in service centers that there is an underground storage tank to take those oils. They're accumulated and then pumped out and taken off somewhere else to be refined or resold. What is the state of those businesses on this site?
So I guess the question is that service going to be performed on that site, and
we were
how is
told
that going to be handled?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, but that was said in Mr. Rivers' statement and in the book. So I want to know how that's going to be handled. We've been told it's going to be done there.
So go ahead, Mr.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think I'd like to know more about that from the applicant. The first I really heard about it was tonight as well through the presentation. Tire sales don't necessarily lead to the other items. Certainly the Ministry of the Environment would likely have to provide some sort of a certificate if they were on that path, but I wouldn't mind hearing more as well.
Through the chair to the councillor, certainly any business of that nature that's going to be going on the property is going to require the appropriate certifications and approvals from the relevant authorities, in this case, the Ministry of Environment. If there's going to be a pit or a storage tank for fluids, that's something that would have to show up in a building permit application, and that would trigger any approvals from the appropriate agencies. In terms of the number of tires that will be stored on the site, we're more than happy to limit the number of tires to the satisfaction of your fire chief, if there's any concern along those lines. And in terms of the concern related to the fitting into the community in St. Anne's, certainly what we're looking at is a building very similar to the types of buildings that you see all over the farming community in Niagara. And if it's something that is appropriate, we'd be more than happy to agree through the site plan approval process to put a noise and visual barrier fence around the entire property.
And through you, Mr. Chair, the idea of and control of seepage onto our roads and under the asphalt into the roadbeds, that would become our responsibility, whether it's the seepage of oil or a mix of oil, tractor, tire, laden water that is going to go into the ditches, from what I read. Is the drainage containment going to be contained on the site? Because I would hate to see tires and or hydraulic fluid and engine oil used or new using the ditches that are adjacent to our roads. There are ditches as well, but having any kind of effluent that we could not, or that we would be responsible for. And unfortunately, in my lifetime, I had to inherit a road that was badly infestated. So I'm just wondering what kind of controls, and I know if you're going to tell me that it's going to be in the building permit, or you're going to tell me that we'll have to control it that way, has it been thought through is the basic question I'm asking, and if not, how would it be done, and when would it be done? So.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, to the councillor, at this point, no, we haven't gone into the detailed design of the operation of the property. We're here to make, to get hopefully zoning approval. Going into that level of detail in design is something that rarely happens until the site plan control stage, and so we will.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I only bring these up because it's the kind of questions that if we don't know and if we don't pose them now, I don't want anybody saying, oh my gosh, how did we get this far down the line and spend all this money and then find out that we can't go forward. So yeah, if I apologize, but hoping that my colleagues and my thoroughness are going to give you the remaining determining factors before you make a decision on this property. I have another question. I apologize for taking so long, Mr. Chair, but it's access to the rail line and the moving of the entrance. Is there any desire to have access to the rail line? No. Good, I got the answer.
Through the chair to the councillor, no, absolutely none.
Okay. And I must reiterate, I totally understand the mayor's comment on page 17 and 18. She stole some of my thunder because I was very concerned about those comments. So if I could, what variances, give me a summation through you, Mr. Chair, what variances are required to make this application move forward?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the variances requested in the application is the reduced lot size and the front yard setback. So, just 1 second. They have requested to reduce the lot area to 0.25 hectares, as and when the required is 0.40 for the AR zone, and front yard setback to be 10 meters, and the required is 30 meters for the AR zone.
Thank you very much. I certainly hope, thank you, Mr. Chairman, I certainly hope that the questions we're asking tonight are constructive and seen to be that way so that decisions can be made by the owners and by us in a future meeting. So thank you very much for your patience with my questions.
Perfect, thank you. I know I have Councillor Bell next. I'm going to just chime in here first, and then Councillor, I'll come to you. So to our director, just to confirm again for the record, what was that property previously used as? Was that, am I understanding correctly, as a junkyard or a wrecking yard, or what was the actual, what was it currently zoned and what was it previously used for?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as I recall, it's always been zoned agricultural, but when I started here in 2006, it was littered with cars and parts of cars, as I recall, with a building that was sort of tucked over towards the railway, and I think the owner at that time was an elderly gentleman that lived on site and then died probably 12 or more years ago, I think, if I recall correctly.
So is it safe to assume that was it a business or a residence that was there, and was it being used illegally?
It was likely non-conforming, would be my guess, based on age.
Okay, no, that's fine. And I was just curious how that was allowed to be permitted under the current zoning if this, which sounds like it's already going to be a million times better than what was already currently existing there. And I'm trying to understand some of the confusion there that at least I had from the way how it was presented.
I'm not familiar with when the business actually started there, but based on the nature of what I recall, I would anticipate prior to 1979 is a good possibility, and that would make it non-conforming.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'll go to Councillor Bell.
So just listening, it sounds like good possibility that ground is already contaminated with oils and other materials. So when it comes time for this individual to close his business or move on, who's responsible for that oil? Is it going to be the township? Is it going to be the present owner, the current owner that's going to take it over? I mean, these are going to come to light down the road somewhere. I also have concerns that for the first time during these conversations, I heard we're going to be servicing farm equipment, changing oils and things like that. At the present time, there's no place to put it other than in a pail because you don't have any underground storage tanks or anything of that nature. There's no buildings on the property. Is it going to be a building? Is it going to be block, tin, canvas building? I just think there's a whole lot to be desired that has to be answered yet. And I think Mr. Rivers needs to go back and talk to his client and come back with a better report for council because this is really...
Well, keep in mind, this is a zoning matter, not a site plan.
Well, I understand, but I got trouble changing the zone,
I get
knowing
it.
what could happen down the road.
But we're putting a cart before the horse if we're trying to get site plan figured out before we get the zoning figured out.
I got trouble with
I got the director.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the only piece that I can add is the fact that I understand the Environmental Protection Act provisions around record of site condition are the obligation of the property owner to comply with. So I believe that the property owner would be obligated to do a record of site condition and a cleanup should one happen. Although based on past history, we do know that if an environmental spill seeped into the road allowance, the potential is there that the road authority could be charged as well. So, you know, it's a valid issue to raise and evaluate as part of site plan for sure.
Perfect. Another question? Are you good?
No, we're good.
Oh, Councillor Chichik.
Can I just ask a question, through you, Mr. Chair, to our director? Environmental cleanups, if they're not known, follow the land. If I am understanding the environmental phase 1, phase 2, but if I buy a site that is contaminated, whether I know or don't, I'm now purchasing the environmental status of the land, and if required to do the changes I have to do, I have to clean it up. And if it goes into power of sale, so I saw you nodding, Mr. Director, so I'm taking that as a yes, that's the facts?
What I'm hearing sounds right to me, yes.
Yes, okay, so, and when people have those pieces of land and they default on their taxes for 3 years because they can't achieve what they thought they were going to do, and they forfeit the land through power of sale, through the tax provisions we have, oftentimes the municipality inherits the burden. And when they inherit the burden, they're held to a higher standard than the owners were because they may not have been changing the zone. Am I going down the right track? Because that's what I remember when I last read the Act. And so when we ask these questions, we're very careful because, one, it may implicate the purchase if it's not already done, but then it also could result that we inherit not just a road that has seepage on it, but in fact the entire parcel. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give a
not.
definitive answer, but this council is familiar with a site in Casterville that is very likely the one that's in everyone's mind. And that site, we improved the situation, but did not make it fully compliant. And the advice of the engineers assisting us was that that was appropriate to proceed with tax sale, and our lawyer, Sarah Premi, was involved in that whole process too. So, but when you get into the tax sale process, that's when I don't have the expertise. There is some sort of a safeguard, I understand, that the municipality doesn't have to assume the liability, but we might find out soon enough. So I don't have the best answer possible without consulting legal.
I'm comfortable with that, and I would think that if this proceeded forward, we'd take council advice before we would proceed forward for everyone's best interest. So
it's in the case of the one that we're all thinking of, it's the reason why it's taken so long to get to this point.
Actually, Mr.
because
Chair,
of those
I'm
issues.
not even thinking this community.
Fair enough, but we do have one.
All right, so at this point, not seeing any other questions or comments, I must advise that a technical report is being considered by the committee this evening and that a recommendation report will be forthcoming to a future committee and/or council meeting. Please also be advised that once committee and/or council has made a decision with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment, and if approved by council, a notice of their passing will be circulated with an appeal period. If you wish to be notified of council's decision, please ensure that you email the township clerk, Joanne Shime, at jshime@westlincoln.ca. Anyone interested in observing council and/or committee discussions about a particular bylaw should not solely rely on mailed notices and thus miss the opportunity to attend applicable meetings. It is also suggested that you watch the township website for posting of agendas to review the items that will be discussed at council and/or committee meetings. The agendas for meetings are posted on the township website after 4 p.m. on the Friday prior to the meeting. And additionally, meeting schedules are also noted on the township website for the public to view. If you wish to receive those notices, it is also suggested that you contact the township clerk to advise of this request and include your email along with your mailing address and phone number. So at this point, I'm going to say that this meeting, a public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, is concluded at the hour of 7:27. So that's just the public meeting version. We'll deal with that at the technical report vote will come later. So we're going to move forward to our next public meeting. This is a public meeting to consider an official plan amendment submitted by the township staff as it relates to an official plan amendment number 65 to implement provincial changes, Bill 109, Bill 23, and others, and its file number is 1701-00123. The Planning Act requires in section 1715 that before passing an official plan amendment, council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the amendments. The purpose of this public meeting is to receive comments and answer questions from the public regarding the amendment to the Township of West Lincoln's official plan. We stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendments, and any comments received will be taken into account by council and their consideration. I also note that the Planning Act requires under Ontario Regulation 54306 that council advise the public that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of West Lincoln before the bylaw is passed, that person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of council for the Township of West Lincoln to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So at this point, I'm going to ask our deputy clerk to please advise the dates and method by which notice to the public was given.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Proper notice was circulated to applicable agencies as well as local developers and their representatives on Friday, April 14th, 2023. Notice was also published on the township's website and in local newspapers on Thursday, April 13th, 2023.
Thank you. So at this point, I'll go to our Director of Planning and Building, Brian Treble, to explain the purpose and reason for the proposed amendment, official plan amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make a couple of observations if I can first, and then I'll dive into some of the boring policy language. First, I guess, just a statement. We are working through Bill 109 and Bill 23. Bill 109 was approved last April, I believe it was, and Bill 23 received royal assent at the end of November. Dave is going to speak later to a new Bill 97 that is front and center in our minds as planners right now because of a lot of different policy changes that are happening. But Bill 97 that's just come out for consultation is also undoing some of the stuff that was just put into Bill 23 last November. So we're trying to catch up to changes that the province made last year, and now they're undoing them. So planning is having a bit of a challenge trying to keep up with all of the fast-moving stuff and the changes to the fast-moving stuff that are kind of occurring as we go. So it's a bit of a flowing, dynamic policy review that we're doing, and it's making things just a little bit challenging on our end. The other piece that's key in all of this is the fact that it's about timelines and trying to expedite review process, or rather than expedite, trying to achieve the timelines in a way that actually will work and we're not paying back monies. And as you know, in our staff reports, we're tracking now the length of time that an application that we have to make a decision. So the challenge with this is that from the timing perspective, there's kind of two ways to deal with the applications. The way this policy is drafted, and based on what I just heard in the first public meeting, I think we've got it maybe the right way. You can either ask for as much information up front as part of a pre-consultation and have as complete and thorough a review of an application before it comes before council, which based on all the questioning you guys just asked of the previous applicant, I would say that's the way it makes sense for you guys. Get as much before you guys in terms of thoroughness and completeness as possible. The other option that's out there is to sort of do a trust us approach, and we get to the point of a public meeting, we've got all these questions, and we simply attach conditions saying, okay, you have approval subject to meeting X, Y, Z, and the other thing. I don't personally like that process as much. I think as much upfront makes sense. I think that's where you guys are too, from the completeness of the questioning that was raised, but just wanted to share that. This draft is written to say we're doing as much at pre-consultation stage as possible, and that seems to probably be, I think, the majority of the municipal approaches out there, but it's not the only approach that's being considered. In fact, you're going to see in correspondence where they're suggesting that if you're doing it that way, they want timelines to keep us moving even through the pre-consultation stage, but that's not part of the Planning Act requirements. So the other thing, Mr. Chair, is that this talks about Bill 109, Bill 23, and others. And the first change that you come to, this is mainly changes to Section 18 of the official plan, and that's the implementation section. So it's the section where you go to look for what the process is for a site plan, what the process is for a rezoning, what the possible options are, holding provisions, conditional zoning, interim control. You go there for all of that kind of language. So the first change is to something called conditional zoning, and that was introduced, gosh, I don't know if it was the Kathleen Wynne government or it might have even been the Dalton McGuinty government that introduced conditional zoning, but kind of parked it after they put provision in the Planning Act and said a regulation will follow. Well, that regulation has never come, but we've added language in here about conditional zoning being a possibility, because it might be one of the implementation techniques that eventually unfolds. I don't know, but it's one of the first sections that we're changing. The site plan control section changes fairly dramatically, but it's really just to make it more clear about what we can do through site plan control and what our expectations are in the way of thoroughness and completeness, and some of the supporting drawings and diagrams that are required as part of that process. This is where another one of the letter's comments is with respect to the ability to apply urban design. Right now, Bill 23, I think it was, took the urban design provisions away from us at site plan stage, but who knows, they could come back again. So Dave and I have had a discussion around not removing the language entirely, but just putting some sort of an, if applicable, kind of provision in there that speaks to site plan and the ability for urban design if we have that power at some point in the future again. Then, Mr. Chair, there's also a change to the interim control provisions that have occurred with respect to appeal periods. At one point, you could appeal an interim control bylaw when it was first put in place. It's a bylaw that freezes development. Then that provision was taken away. You couldn't appeal until there was an extension, but now it appears it's coming back that you can now appeal in the first instance again. So it's another one of these moving pendulums. Community benefits is a big new section that's been modified. It used to be something called bonusing. West Lincoln never really got into it, but a lot of the larger municipalities got into it extensively. If you wanted to build a higher building than permitted under the zoning bylaw and the official plan, you could do so subject to paying and providing certain things in lieu of additional stories in a building. They've tightened that up dramatically and changed it to community benefits. So we've added some language to reflect that new thinking. It's possible when we do our development charges review in the fall that community benefits will come out of that discussion, but it only applies in higher density situations. So it hasn't historically probably worked for us, but it might in the future. The agricultural consent policies are not changed in this version that's before you tonight, but based on the report that Dave will speak to later, it's something we may have to come back to if the province's draft policies proceed. And the same with environmental policies. We don't even have the changes that they're proposing to environmental policies, but we anticipate fairly dramatic changes there as well, which then might affect the severance provisions that are outlined in this section. So they're not in here yet, but that might be a future review. The other big one is section 1817, which is the pre-consultation and complete application. This is where we're front-ending, if I can call it that, all of the requirements in the in the pre-consultation, so that staff and the agencies sit down and say, okay, this is what we're going to need. Go do these reports, bring them back so we can look at them at a second pre-consultation, then we'll go to the public meeting process. We don't do that second pre-consultation now. We don't really get a chance to review the studies in depth until we're providing them in a public forum. So Mr. Rivers' report, for example, really came straight to you guys hot off the press, more or less, whereas in the future, we'll have to do a review, say where there's weaknesses, ask him to rewrite it, then bring it back, and then we go to the public process. That's the idea going forward. So there's a lot of detail added in to give us the authority to do it that way. Two final changes that I'll speak to, and I know I'm going through this really fast. There's a provision 1824 that's added, and that's what's called delegated authority. There are provisions in the Planning Act to delegate some decisions to staff. I don't quite understand how they would work, but something called a minor zoning bylaw can be approved by staff in the future and not have to be approved by council. The removal of a holding provision could be approved by staff as opposed to having to come to council as well. So there's a delegated authority provision added with respect to that. And the final section that's new in here as well is 1825, which is a cost-sharing policy. And it's drafted based on the language in the landowners agreement that we signed in October of 2017 to basically say, you guys paid us as part of the study work to get the studies done. Then as part of the development charge collection at the time of building permits, we will give a portion of that money back to you guys to pay. And their obligation on that end is to take the money and divide it properly amongst their members. We're not going to do that for them. We just give them a lump sum and then they have to divide it appropriately. So the language is in here. The NPG letter that I'll be reading here in a minute, Mr. Chair, suggests that there are changes to that language that are needed. And all I'm really going to say tonight is the fact that I'm relying on Tom Richardson in his consultations with Helen Mahalady, I think that's how you say the lawyer's name on the other side, to advise staff. So we won't be able to bring it back until we have those discussions finalized to help guide us through what that language should look like. So that's the end of my presentation, Mr. Chair. I will read the
Go ahead.
correspondence
Yes.
when you think it's appropriate to do so.
I'll just have you do it right now. Just
Okay.
keep it moving.
So I'm only reading it into the record because I think only councillors have seen it to date and probably our CAO and clerk. But it's correspondence related to this public meeting to deal with agents, well, it's not agency, it's landowner comments from Phelps and Georgia Caucus by NPG Planning Solutions. Please accept this letter as comments on behalf of Phelps Homes regarding Township of West Lincoln OPA 65 and the proposed modifications to be brought to Township Council. NPG Planning Solutions, Inc. are land use planning consultants to Phelps Homes and JTG Holdings regarding their lands within the OPA 63 secondary plan area. Phelps Homes and JTG Holdings are also participants in the landowners group for OPA 63. The Phelps lands are in Phase 4A and 4B, while the JTG Holding lands are in Phase 4C of OPA 63. We are sending this letter to you to provide commentary on the proposed OPA 65. Our comments are relative to the matters outlined in this letter. First, they refer to site plan control, and I had mentioned their urban design concerns. So OPA 65 proposes to include certain design matters as being included in the township's review of site plans. Please note that exterior design is no longer subject to site plan control. This policy requires further revision based on the requirements of the Planning Act. I sent this item of correspondence to the region for their input as well. Then they speak about pre-consultation. OPA 63 proposes 3 stages in the process of pre-consultation, which would consist of pre-consultation to determine submission requirements, review of completed studies, and then commencement of the timelines under Bill 109. So in other words, the public meeting process. This process moves the current process of review of applications and the studies to a process outside the Planning Act timeline. The work of the current provincial government is to build homes more expeditiously. The proposed process appears to be at odds with the province's commitment to building more housing. This is evidenced by moving reviews outside the Planning Act timelines and by the lack of commitment to timely decision-making and timelines to respond to submissions. For example, there is no commitment to holding a pre-consultation in a timely manner, nor is there a commitment to a certain timeline to hold the pre-consultation. There is no commitment to a response time for the applicants to receive documentation from the pre-consultation. There is no commitment to a timeline for review of completed studies. There is no commitment to a timeline for when a decision on completeness will be communicated. Taken with the proposed policies and the lack of commitment to timely decision-making, the policies are not aligned to the legislation. Further, applicants have rights under the Planning Act regarding an application submission and completeness. The policies in OPA 65 in effect remove the rights of applicants in the Planning Act. Revisions to these policies are required. Cost sharing. Proposed policy 1825 addresses cost sharing in the Smithville urban boundary expansion lands. The policies confer authority on the trustee of the landowners group for confirmation. These policies in essence create the trustee of the landowners group as an authority with decision-making power as part of the conditions of development approval. We submit to you that this type of authority is outside the scope of the Planning Act, as there are specific agencies and authorities in the Act, none of which are landowners group trustees. These policies must be removed from the OPA. Cost-sharing policies, however, are necessary for the township to implement OPA 63 and the planned growth in Smithville. The township must commit to a fulsome financial strategy and the implementation tools to achieve a financially viable and sustainable development in Smithville's urban boundary expansion. The township policies need to include a fair and equitable sharing of the costs of providing the required infrastructure and community facilities, a sharing of the costs on a pro rata basis among all the landowners to ensure the costs of the studies and infrastructure are shared fairly and equitably, a commitment to an acceptable financial strategy for the costs of infrastructure and community facilities. The financial strategy must include the township and the region as participants, identifying the contributions to the infrastructure and community facilities by both organizations and landowners. The implementation of the financial strategy must include, but not be limited to, the following: an update of the development charges bylaw for the township and the region, a commitment to preparing a front-ending agreement, cost-sharing agreements for infrastructure and for community facilities, policies that include best efforts, cost recovery requirements, as well as detailed financial implementation policies to ensure that costs are paid fairly and equitably, and repayment made to any landowner who front-ends infrastructure and/or community facilities. There are multiple examples of municipalities who have successfully implemented financial planning and a fair and equitable cost-sharing strategy for greenfield communities. We would be pleased to provide examples from these communities. The cost-sharing policies as proposed must be removed and rewritten for the reasons above. Conclusion, thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on OPA 65. It is our view that there is more work to be done on the policies, and the amendment should be returned to staff for further work. We would be pleased to meet with Township staff to review our feedback and discuss new options for the policies. And then just asking for a copy of the decision. And the only thing I'll add is just sort of my own words, is the fact that I have had discussions with Phelps Homes representatives around the cost-sharing policy, and it's clear that one is needed. I had asked them for examples probably a month ago or so, and I still don't have any examples to this day, but they indicate there's lots out there. Anyway, so as I say, the draft that's been put before us in the policy document tonight is taken from the agreement that was signed in 2017, and we'll see what Tom Richardson guides in terms of how to move forward on that piece. So, Mr. Chair, at that point, I think I've covered everything I need to do, and I'll turn it back to you guys to proceed through the public process.
So I'll go to the public submissions, and I'll ask, we have some people here, are there any oral written submissions from anyone present, either in person or on the Zoom meeting, regarding the proposed official plan amendment? I would like to stress that this may be the only public meeting held with this with respect to this application. Therefore, if any members of the public that are in attendance at this meeting, public meeting, would like to make their comments or provide a written comment, they should do so now. If they're attending virtually and would like to provide comments, you can do so by using one of the two options. If you're on a computer or a smartphone, you're going to raise your hand through the raise your hand feature there, and if you're calling in, you're going to hit *9, and that's going to notify our staff. I don't think I saw anybody call in yet, but just in case that's changed. Once you've been acknowledged to speak, we ask that you unmute your microphone. It is important to provide your comments now if you're not done so in writing or verbally, as the OLT will not consider comments or may not consider comments made during any other council and or committee meetings. Also, anyone wishing to speak are required to unmute the microphone to talk, and then once they're done, we ask you to remute your microphone. And I'll be asking you to give your name and address for the record. So at this point, I'll go to IT just to see what our virtual gallery situation is, if there's any attendees there that have a hand up. Not seeing any. Anybody physically here wanting to speak to this? Not seeing any. So then I'm going to move to members of committee. Do any members of committee have any oral or written submissions on the proposed official plan amendment? Please note that members of committee must make their comments now, as the OLT may not consider comments made at any other council and or committee meeting. I think there's a typo there. Any members of council wishing to speak are required to unmute their microphone to talk, and then once you're done, I'll kindly remind you to remute yourself. So at this point, looking around the horseshoe here, I have Councillor Chichuk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you to the director, I understand the need for developers to feel comfortable that we will not delay their moving forward because of a cost-sharing group. But I find it very concerning that the cost-sharing groups for development groups are all virtually done by Helen Mahaliti, who is a very fine development lawyer. But in the past, I have heard a reluctance for the developers to want to give us their cost-sharing group because of the complexity of some developers are in the entirety of the cost-sharing, excluded from others. They're giving land, they're not giving land, and we have not been privileged to that information. Have things changed to the point where we are now being asked to get very involved in the cost-sharing agreements and to adjudicate on behalf of developers over developers? Because I would think that's not our role.
Through you, Mr. Chair, The landowners group is struggling at the moment. I think that would be a fair way to describe it, simply because there are people in different phases that don't really want to be in those phases, and you know, unfortunately, somebody comes first, somebody comes last. That's the nature of a phasing strategy, and the ones that are towards the end are not overly happy about it. It's my opinion that they are obligated to continue to operate as a committee because we pay back the collected development charge pieces to offset costs of the study to somebody on that end who then divides amongst the group. It's not our job to figure out what those proportions are, and Joanne has correctly pointed out the fact that right now we don't know. It's, I think, based on acreage that's involved or acreage that each individual member represents in the group. Some are in, some are out. So some get money back, some don't, some get credits, some have to pay. And it's really up to that group to sort that out. It's beyond us. So that's why this is written to basically say it's up to them. The ones commenting are one of the groups that are somewhat inactive at the moment. So it's possible that there is a bit of a disagreement amongst that group, but I've got the lawyers trying to communicate to sort out exactly what's going on. So Tom and Helen are discussing things, but that's about all I know at this point.
Mr. Chair, and the other question is that with the whipsaw kind of government legislation that has been put through, would it be fair to say that we're not sure where this is going to land with Bill 97 and any subsequent legislation, because it seems we get it, we deal with it, or almost, and then it changes with regularity?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure exactly how to answer that because it's kind of unpredictable. But you know, I think the Bill 109 stuff, about the only thing that happened there was they delayed the implementation of the timeline for the return of funding from January 1st until July 1st or something like that. But Bill 23, we have seen a few changes, and there's been a lot of development charge changes that I just don't see some of that stuff sticking. When they're requiring the tax base to pay to help developers get rich, I'm not sure that's going to sell once the public starts to understand that. So I wouldn't be surprised that things are topsy-turvy for a while longer, but as it is, we have to sort of roll with the punches, and that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's the answer I was looking for.
All right. Any other members of the committee? Not seeing or hearing any. I will move forward. I must advise that a technical report is being considered by the committee this evening and that a recommendation report will be forthcoming to a future committee and/or council meeting. Please also be advised that once committee and/or council has made a decision with respect to the official plan amendment, and if approved by council, a notice of its passing will be circulated with an appeal period. If you wish to be notified of council's decision, please ensure that you email the township clerk, Joanne Shime, at jshime@westlincoln.ca. Anyone who is interested in observing council and community discussions about a particular bylaw should not solely rely on mailed notices and thus miss the opportunity to attend applicable meetings. It is suggested that you watch the township website for posting of the agendas to review the items that will be discussed at council and/or committee. The agendas for those meetings are posted on the township website after 4 p.m. on the Friday prior to the meeting, and additionally, meeting schedules are also noted on the township website for the public to view. If you wish to receive those notices as well by email, it is suggested that you contact the township clerk to advise of your request and include your email address along with your mailing address and phone number. So, just looking at the time here, so I'm going to state that the public meeting with respect to the proposed official plan amendment is concluded at the hour 7:53 p.m. That takes care of our public meetings here, and we're going to move on forward. So, thank you, everyone, for your patience and for your presentations and for your feedback. Oh, just give me a second to get into my... Okay. So, that's not me, okay. So, first things first, actually, one of the things I was going to do when we came at a close earlier, but we kind of jumped right into the public meetings, I'm going to ask committee here We're gonna stand for a moment. We're gonna take a moment of silence. Over the weekend there, we lost a valued member to our community, who also worked for the township as a crossing guard. His name's Rick Tracy there, and his, valued member of the community, him and his family, and it's a real tragedy what happened to him. So at this time, I'm gonna ask members of the community to please stand for a moment of silence, and then we'll go forward with the rest of the meeting. Thank you. So I'm going to move on forward here. I'm going to look at committee if there's any changes in orders of items on the agenda. Not seeing any. We have an appointment tonight. And so I will invite our delegation up to the front here, Malcolm and Vera, and they are going to make their presentation to council. And then I'll read the rest from that point forward. So,
That's it. Okay. You want to sit down? Yeah. Okay. Okay, good evening, councilors, Mayor Ganan, and Mr. Chair.
So we're going to just hold 1 second. We're just figuring out an IT matter. So one second, please.
You can review it, but we're not going to share it.
Yeah, that's fine, But I still flip through it, right?
Yeah, you can still.
Because I have some points to speak to within it.
I just wouldn't share it, but you can use this, but I wouldn't share it this way.
Okay.
So you can use it yourself.
Okay, that'd be fine.
Okay.
Because it's been circulated.
Yeah.
If it's this way, it's shared.
Okay.
We're going to click through it individually.
Okay. Okay, sure.
So, how can I click through it individually? Because I have points to speak to within it, but I understand that they didn't want it. Okay, great.
All
Okay,
right, perfect.
Great,
Thank you for that. Appreciate your patience there.
Yeah, no problem. Again, good evening. So I understand that this presentation's been circulated amongst you individually prior to this. I'm just going to click through it because I have points to speak to within it,
That's
basically. Okay, so we just want to talk about bylaw enforcement that we believe is required, further bylaw enforcement. Okay, so we live on Dennis Drive in Smithville, in the new subdivision that was a March subdivision, just off of Highway 20, kind of opposite Vic's Tile, if you're familiar with that area. So currently, just to review parking bylaw, stopping, standing, or parking your vehicle is illegal in certain areas where signs are posted. So where there's a no parking sign, it's no parking. Also, though, the way bylaw is, if you're parked within 1.5 meters of a driveway, there doesn't need to be a sign to say that. That's to be understood. It's up to you as a citizen to know what the bylaw is. So it's just a couple examples, and that's kind of the heart of what we're getting at. For our background, we lived in Smithville since 2014. We used to be on Barbara Street, actually, and then we moved into Dennis Drive in 2020, August of 2020.
Unfortunately.
So shortly thereafter, we noticed people started parking within 1.5 meters of our driveway on a regular basis, and also parking right against no parking signs on a regular basis. In November 2022, the town sent out an information packet to all residents in our subdivision that explained what all the parking rules were and outlined where you could and could not park. So we followed up on parking concerns with the bylaw officer. After submitting several concerns, he left us a phone message and told us to stop reporting the concerns. The officer admits his main working hours are 9 to 5. This enforcement period we feel is ineffective because most people are at work 9 to 5. Most of these offenses we see take place after 5 o'clock, before 9 a.m., especially on Saturday and Sunday, on the weekends, where there is no enforcement. We called Niagara Region for the after-hours bylaw. They told us that in West Lincoln there is no bylaw enforcement after 5 p.m. or on the weekend. So some examples.
So if you look at your screens, you will see
I don't know if you have the presentation. You've just reviewed it previously. Okay, no problem. So we have a vehicle that's parked within 1.5 meters of a driveway, ample space to park elsewhere within regular parking. In this case, we called the bylaw officer. He told me that the vehicle was not there, and I said, I'm looking at the vehicle right now, and he said, no, it's not. So then we called Public Works just to get somewhere. Spoke to Mike DePaula, and then shortly after that, the bylaw officer arrived and issued a ticket. That's the only time we'd seen any action on anything that we'd reported. Another case, this is 8:41 p.m., so after 5 p.m., a vehicle within 1.5 meters of the driveway, right around the no parking sign, ample alternate parking available.
as well as the snow, which we can't remove because the vehicle is right there. So it requires us to walk 2 feet to remove the 3 feet or 4 feet of snow sometimes we have there, because we would have to put it on a vehicle itself because the vehicle is right there.
It's a compound problem that the vehicle's so close to the driveway that the snowplow can't always get directly in to clear the frontage of the driveway. This is a case on a Sunday, a truck and trailer parked well off the curb, but within 1.5 meters of the driveway, ample alternate parking available. In this case, there is a no parking sign. The vehicle's right in front of the no parking sign, also within 1.5 meters of the driveway. This is on a Saturday. April 4th, this is at 6:35 p.m., so after 5 p.m., a vehicle parked right in front of a no parking sign within 1.5 meters of the driveway. Another vehicle, this is on a Saturday, parked right on the no parking sign within 1.5 meters of the driveway. Again, on the weekend and after 5, there is no bylaw enforcement. On a Sunday, another vehicle right in front of the no parking sign within 1.5 meters of the driveway. And again, on a Sunday, there's no bylaw enforcement. So why does this affect us specifically? When we exit the driveway, when they're parked that close to the driveway, I can't see into oncoming traffic. Whether you're driving out or backing out, until you're in traffic, you can't see if there is traffic. So you really have to creep out and really be careful. This is dangerous for not only cars, but also bicycles that would pass by or any pedestrian that might be walking. Very difficult to get out of that driveway safely.
I also know that there was a study done with the speed, the way the vehicles are going. However, that is not the case. The vehicles are still going over 50 kilometers an hour speed. So for me backing out or my husband, we can be hit at any time.
You'd have to be incredibly careful, and really in a lot of cases you just back blind out.
I back blind all the time, unfortunately.
This is a short video that we included that kind of really illustrates what we're talking about here exactly. Another photo here that shows where my property line is. An additional problem is when I try to cut that frontage, like cut the lawn,
You can hit the cars.
when I'm using the weed trimmer or the lawnmower, I could be throwing stones and hitting a vehicle that's parked illegally, but I'm sure they wouldn't like that either, but the vehicle is parked illegally and I have the right to cut that frontage there, right? So we recommend maybe hiring at least one additional bylaw officer. Currently, there's just one officer for 14,500 people. Maybe offering overtime hours to that officer, and some of that overtime hours might be paid by tickets that are issued. Adjustment of the current bylaw officer's hours to create weekend or after 5 p.m. or other hour coverage. Irregular enforcement schedule might prevent people from predicting enforcement because they don't know when someone's going to come and look at their vehicle. Educating citizens has already been done because the town sent out the pamphlet that said where you can and cannot park, as well as the posted sign that indicates that you cannot park there. They choose to violate the law. So in our mind, monetary fines is the only way that's going to change anything here. And you might say this is an isolated case that most people would have common respect. We added some other cases. There's a man urinating right beside my backyard. This is in a public park, right near the playground area.
And I just want to add that my husband's saying, this was during the time when the children were playing in the playground. So the children are actually watching this man publicly urinate. Yeah, so you can imagine the mental distress that the children can have and the consequences of this.
Another case, this was on a holiday weekend where there is no bylaw enforcement. They had fireworks display in the park with an audience. One of those fireworks hit the roof of a bungalow on Morgan Avenue and bounced off. The owner probably didn't know that. We called the police. The police told us to call bylaw, but there's no bylaw to call because it's a holiday weekend. Dogs off leash is a regular thing on the weekend in that park as well, and on the weekend, there's no one to call. So again, we just wanted to go over the recommendations to hire another officer, since there is a lot of area in West Lincoln, 14,500 people to cover, or overtime for the current officer, and those overtime hours could be paid by tickets, monetary fines, and you might recover some of that money that way. Or adjust the bylaw officer's hours so that there is some coverage on a Saturday or Sunday or after 5 p.m. Because as we said, most people are at work 9 to 5, so they're not parking during that period, and these other activities either during that period. This really all takes place on holiday weekend, regular weekend, or after 5 p.m. Educating citizens has been done. These people are choosing to do this on their own, so we kind of feel that monetary fine is the only way that anyone is going to change their behavior. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to add also that, you know, in almost a decade living in Smithville, we never seen such a disrespectful behavior as we've seen in this new subdivision that was just put in 2 years ago. We were personally shocked. And, you know, I personally immigrated from Ukraine a few years ago, and now I have no land. So this is my only land. And we all have responsibility that we share to take care of this land and our parks and our law, so we can have a peaceful life in our town.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Well said. Thank you. I guess what we'll do is, because there's a recommendation here, I'll read that, I'll get a mover, a seconder, and then if anybody has questions, we can ask questions then. So I have that, the presentation by Malcolm and Vera High regarding various bylaw concerns addressed at the May 8, 2023 Planning Building Environmental Committee meeting be received for information and referred to staff. So I got Mary Ganan, I get a seconder, I got Councillor Trombetta. Any questions or comments at this time? None? Okay. I guess I'll just say that I know for years, I've been here for maybe not much longer than yourselves there, but I've always been concerned from the lack of, I guess, size of our bylaw department. Our bylaw officer wears many different hats, not just dealing with parking infractions and stuff like that. Like they, you know, from one side of our municipality to another, they're definitely overworked, in my opinion. So I'm certainly not in opposition to this in any capacity. Anything that we can do to expand that department to help deal with other issues might actually, you know, be for the betterment of the community. Before I go to Councillor Trombetta there, I'll say that I guess. To the director, do you some of the concerns there, like with public urination? I think maybe Public Works, you know, could be consulted in finding some, you know, some potential. And there's obviously have to come to budget, some potential like a few extra porta potties throughout some of our more populated parks. But I don't think bylaw would actually be able to do anything in that respect unless they really catch them in the act. And my guess is by time, and I know you're just giving examples, but just also managing expectations, I feel like sometimes that's the catch-22, right? So it's just helping to have that, but I also wondering what we can do in terms of, I know when people talk about you can't park between 2 and 6 a.m., but where's the enforceability and what's the point of the bylaw? And so I'm just wondering through you if you wanted to shed some comments on that.
Yeah, I can, through you, Mr. Chair, I can add a few comments. But, you know, I guess the one thing I'll start with is to say it doesn't matter how much we do, we can't stop stupid. And sometimes that is what we're dealing with. Parking enforcement, we have over the winter months had rotating times when our bylaw officer was out between 2 and 6 doing enforcement. And we have also had alternate hours where he stays after work and stuff like that to switch it around so that we're not predictable in our enforcement and stuff like that. But with one officer, it is limited in the amount of that we can do for sure. And the reality is we're never going to be in the right place at the right time. That just seems to be Murphy's Law. So we did generate somewhere in the range of $11,000 in parking ticket revenues that, you know, not that we're in this for the money at all, but, you know, that is evidence of how much or how many tickets have been issued when they're roughly, or on average, about a $30 ticket. So, you know, we are doing work, and we are enforcing the bylaws, but we're never everywhere at the right time.
11,000 is probably minimal compared to what it would generate if you had, another bylaw officer who's enforcing some other aspects, or if that'd free up the current bylaw officer.
Yeah, but if I may, just don't anticipate that bylaw is going to pay for itself. I wouldn't anticipate
No,
that at all.
yes, I realize that. Councillor Tremetta? Oh, sorry, Councillor Bradrick? All right,
Thank
we're
you.
playing musical chairs here.
So, actually, Brian, actually answered the question I was going to advise, is there is a misconception that bylaw penalties pay for the staffing, and it is not the fact. And so that's where, Brian, when did our first bylaw officer come on board? Was that in 2019? I'm thinking it was the first time.
Yeah, that would be the first time that we had a person that's more or less dedicated to bylaw. Back in the day, back probably 15 years ago, we had Pelham doing parking enforcement for us, and that was sort of a dedicated enforcement thing that was a little more active than we are, perhaps. But yeah, since about 2019, it's been a dedicated resource to parking, or to bylaw, I should say.
So just to be clear, we're still watching the data, and we would make a case, but there are opportunities that we can certainly look into. But it is to our presenters finding that appropriate time to be there. And you're right to talk about the fact that you have to vary the time. And so it's not I wish it were easier to administer, but Brian has also confirmed that we have been active. And in terms of those issuances, and our biggest issue is regarding snow clearing, and ensuring that the cars are removed prior to a snow event is our biggest issue, and we work really hard in that regard, and that's where a lot of the education comes in.
May I just add something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to add that the Smithfield population is going to probably double or triple soon, so this is another thing that we need to consider. Eventually, you will have to add another officer and more workforce, and the fines are the only way, monetary fines are the only way to control this.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think the other thing is too, with how, in your particular area too, there's lack of parking availability. And so it's almost like it's a conundrum, right? Because, we're trying to have people be respectful neighbors at the same time. Some of these people don't know where they can park their vehicles. And so we're trying to solve two things, or two different puzzles at the same time. But anyways, I don't know, you guys are... Okay, so Councillor Bradrick, then Councillor Trombetta. No, that's fine.
Thank you very much, through you, Chair, to the Director. I know we have chatted before in regards to staff capacity with bylaw, and it is my understanding that there may be other staff within our employment that do have some bylaw authority, and can that be something that could be maybe used for the park situations? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are a number of staff that have added authority or power. Some of it is with respect to certain areas or certain topics, like our chief is designated as a bylaw officer with respect to fire-related things and fireworks, for example. I believe there is at least one person in the Parks Department that does have bylaw provisions with respect to parks-related matters. It's just, you have to catch them in the act, and that's the tough part, right? By the time the call comes in saying there's an issue going on and you get out there, a lot of times the event is over, or you haven't seen or witnessed it yourself. And I believe that we maybe even have people designated as weed inspectors, for example, which would be another type of bylaw. Then inside my department, not only do we have Jesse as the full-time bylaw officer, but both our building inspector and our acting CBO are designated as municipal law enforcement officers as well. So any of those people can certainly do the task, but they have, some of them have additional responsibilities that come first and foremost.
Especially the CBO, pretty big responsibility.
Mr. Chairman, can I add something
Go
as
for
well?
it. Yeah.
In regards to fire chief, when the fireworks that happened that you saw on our presentation, there was a child going around that was sent by a parent, and the child was saying that there's going to be fireworks tonight. So what I've done, I've actually called our fire chief and left him a voicemail saying that there's going to be fireworks tonight. It's illegal, you know. Nobody ever called me back, unfortunately. Then we called the police, and the police told us to call the bylaw, which wasn't present. So this is what happened. I've also contacted yourself, and
Yes.
there was no permission for fireworks for that particular moment. And that's the same fireworks that are on the presentation.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think it just shed a little bit light, even with the reaching out to the fire department, that's not, if it's their town line, that's not monitored 24/7, so if you leave a message, they probably didn't get back to you till
I
Monday.
tried.
If they get back to you.
I tried.
Yeah, so it really comes down to either us having a bylaw officer who's either available and in the community at the time, or the police.
Yeah.
Sorry, did you still have a continuation?
I have a further comment.
Okay, go ahead, sorry,
Thank
Councillor.
you. So through you, Chair, to the Director, and the recommendation that's sitting on the table right now is a staff review of this issue, I believe.
Yes, it's just referring
Thank
back
you.
to staff.
And I would, like for that consideration as well, that staff capacity piece to be part of that staff investigation, so that we can look at, possibilities of expanding that capacity, perhaps within the Parks Department, when, park staff are out and about and maybe see something, there could be somebody that they could call, so they could catch somebody in the act. Just thought that could be an encompassing part of the report.
Perfect.
Thank
I
you.
imagine this would be a budgetary matter anyway, so probably best address next budget, but, did you have a follow-up, sorry?
Just basically to say that, Bev and I will, our CAO and I will work to put some sort of a business case together, and it'll be a budget discussion if there is an increase of that sort of service level, so.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, you good? Any other members? Not seeing or hearing any. So, so at this point, I guess the motion on the table, I'll read it again, that the presentation by Malcolm and Vera High regarding various bylaw concerns addressed at the May 8th, 2023 Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting be received for information and referred to staff. So I'll let our clerk put the vote forward, and we'll see if it comes up here. And then momentarily, the outcome will be displayed. And in the meantime, thank you guys very much for your presentation and
Thank you.
for bringing the matter forward. Just last month we had another couple come forward to us dealing with the noise issue, and kind of like fine tuning, helping us get ahead of that curve of where the community's growing and dealing with some of the noise issues that
And
we're
it's only
experiencing.
going to
in the
grow more and more.
community. It is.
Yeah, I
agree.
think so.
Thank you very much, everyone.
We're
Thank
just
you.
waiting
Thank
on two. Which two are we waiting on? Okay, so Councilor Braddock supports it, and who? Rayner. Councilor Rayner, you figured it out?
Yeah,
Uh,
thanks.
You want to just say manually? Oh, all right. That's, there you go, and that carries. Perfect. All right, so we'll move forward to any other members that would like to address any items on the agenda. We only have one member left in the gallery, assuming not. Anybody virtually? IT? Nope, we lost our one attendee, so we're going to move forward. Consent agenda items. Let me just bring this up here. All right, so under section 10.1, item P4123, that the Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting hereby approve the following consent agenda items. Items 1, 2, and 3B are hereby received for information with the exceptions of items, and there's currently none. I have the exceptions of item 1, and so we'll be voting on items 2 and 3. So I need a mover and a seconder. Mayor Ganan, Councilor Bell, and I will let our clerk work her magic there for the vote. So we're only voting on items 2 and 3. Okay, I have that, oh, sorry, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself here. Okay, so that carries. So now we're going to go back to item 1. I have a mover, which is Councilor Rayner. I need a seconder. I have Councilor Bell. Councilor Rayner?
Yes, thank you. I just don't know which file number it is. If you look at 6.1, it's file number 1601-011-23. If you look at the technical report, it's file number 1601-01-23.
I'm trying to bring it up here.
Only one can be correct. I'm sure everybody else seen that.
Wow, I was looking just at the screen, so good eyes.
This is referring to this with another report, if I remember.
Oh, but that's your report, isn't it?
I think it's.
Yeah, I see it. So that's, sorry, can I? Oh, I have it here, right? Okay, so it is file number 1701-001-23, which,
You say 001?
well, that's what I have here.
No,
Did I read the right
it's
one?
either
Yeah.
011 or 01, not 001.
Well, I have 001 here,
So it's different than these two.
I'm just reading what I have off my sheet here, so I'm gonna go back to the clerk here to see
mackerel, no, it's really
what
bad.
we're, well, oh, so sorry, I see what he's asking. So no, he's referring to just the report number, the technical report, not the file number.
Yes, it says
So
file
he's saying
number.
it's 27 here, right? And then here it's saying it's, I think, 23. Hold on. Yeah, see how it says PD 22, 23, and it's saying PD 27, 23. So we just want to get clarity to that.
There's no 27, 23.
I'm
Mr.
assuming
Chair,
it's 22. No, it couldn't be 22. It would have to be. Have the,
Mr. Chair,
yeah, go ahead.
at the very end of 6.1, it says bracket, file number 1601-011-23. But on the resolution here, it has bracket, file number 1601-01-23. That's what I'm referring to. I don't know where your other numbers are.
So I'm going to wait for the clerk to give us the clarity. 001,
So they're both wrong.
technology.
Wow, it's bigger error than I thought it was. I thought somebody just forgot a one.
There you go. Good eyes, look. More than just a pretty face, Counselor.
Well, that's a change from earlier, but thank you very much.
All right, so
Mr.
all
Chair.
the comments, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Pardon me?
Do you have a fourth number?
No, the counselor pulled item 1, but he's talking about item 2.
Pardon?
So you're talking, so that's
Isn't he?
17, so you're talking about,
No.
he's talking about, yeah, he's talking about one.
Then, okay. Then,
You want me to repeat it again?
well, but he's
No.
looking at the zoning amendment.
I know,
Number 1
he
is the
said the
OPA.
1601 number, he said that, I think he's looking at the 1601-01-23, which is actually item number 2. The number I gave you originally, the 1701-001-23, is item 1, which you pulled. So I think you're looking at 2, but you pulled 1.
No, because 6.1 says 5/6/23 20-mile road. The technical report says 5/6/23 20-mile road. And then after that is the bracket of the file number. And the only difference between the two is one says 011 and the other says 01.
But one relates to 6.2.
They're 2 different files.
6.2 is Bill 109 and 23. It's got nothing to do with 56/23 20-mile road.
So
But 5620 Mile Road is item 2 within the consent
that's
agenda,
what I
isn't
have in
it?
front of me, yeah.
Not on mine.
Oh,
Not on
really?
mine.
What?
You want to see mine?
What, here, keep passing here. I just
How's
want-
that
On the
possible?
website, it's different. No, item 1 is 2022.
No, it's actually,
mine.
it's,
Jenny printed
he's
this
right,
out.
it's reversed on mine.
Jenny gave me this.
So, and then,
I found even more problems.
They had the same one I did.
Apparently, okay.
yeah. Yeah, I don't understand. Where did you print this from?
It was printed today.
Oh, it's on yours as well? Okay, because I'm like, mine's saying exactly what the printout is exactly on eScribe, so I don't know how.
I would, at the right time, Mr. Chair, make an amendment to correct all the files to read as the clerk has read out to us with the appropriate number, and that the modifications be made on the correction of the in the minutes when we put those to print.
Okay.
That would, thank you, Councillor Bell.
I don't know what happened.
It's very
So you'll just.
Yeah. That's number 1. Yours is 27 as number 2. That's bizarre.
There was 2 different agendas, and they must have flipped them.
Oh, but this is easy.
I printed this today, so when did they change it?
We're just dealing with a little technical difficulty here, so let's just see here. So when we.
Mr. Chair, we have a motion on the floor. If that's not suitable to the clerk, we can amend it, but I think we're just trying to resolve the issue for tonight and put it into your hands to be reconciled.
Okay, let me just see. Just done.
Exactly. I'd like to call the question if we could.
Well, we just lost a counselor, so you want to call it without him in the room?
Yeah. He chose to leave.
Actually, are you going to hold there because the chair hasn't recognized you yet? So at this point, I'm referring still back to the clerk. You haven't been recognized.
No, it's still me.
No, I'm going to the clerk, and so no one else has been recognized until we get this resolved. So I'm going to ask everyone just to sit tight, please.
Whatever.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at this point in time, we did have a motion on the floor we carried the first and second, and we're speaking of the one item. So because we've already moved in second the pulling of item number 1, so we've already we've already moved and seconded the 2 resolutions. For technical report, I can read them out loud so everybody understands. So the first mover and seconder understand what we've moved, and then we can go with your item number 2. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. So
So
read
you're-
the official
Yes.
approved is here.
Okay, so right now, as it stands, members of committee have moved what it says on the agenda to be, and I will read it out loud. Okay, that items 2 and 3 be and are hereby received for information. Items 2 and 3 are technical report PD 22-2023, application for zoning bylaw amendment 5623 20 Mile Road, file number 1601-01-23. Number 3, information report PD-23-2023, site plan and development agreement approval update. Number 1 was pulled by Councillor Rayner. Number 1 being technical report PD-27-2023, proposed township official plan amendment number 65 to implement provincial changes, Bill 109-23, and others.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go back to Councillor Rayner, who originally had the floor.
So what we've got is a reverse here. I've got
Yes.
1 and 1 is 2, 2 is
Okay.
1. But it still doesn't, okay, let's take the technical report PD-22-23 and it now becomes number 2. It still doesn't line up with 6.1 file number 1601-011-23, which is applicable for your number 2, which is 5623 20 Mile Road.
So my suggestion through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Rayner would be to go back to the original mover and seconder of this motion and pull item, as I just read to everybody, as item number 2 instead of item number 1. We will pull item number 2 and vote, and everybody would vote on the first and second. 1 and 3, yes.
Mr. Chair,
Go for it.
just a question I got. How come, Councilor Chichok, same way, how come ours is twisted?
That's a great question. I don't have an answer for that. So is it, I do have a question, is it everybody else? So, because mine is on eScribe as well, and mine is done the correct way.
I think you and I maybe share the same.
Okay, because I would say, like, the three of us have exactly how it was presented, and then the remainder wasn't, so.
You're different?
Huh?
So I think, yeah, there's a.
Okay, so we'll have to have IT investigate this to correct that for the future.
Well, let's just say we'll have it corrected, and that's all we
Yep.
need to do.
Yep.
Is that okay? Let them do it.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that legally we have the right numbers.
And we
for
brought it
reserves.
to their attention, so now it can be reviewed
That's
back
all
at
we
staff.
have. All right.
So at this point, I'll have you read what the order of things are gonna go there, so that we can vote on this.
Thank you, Mr.
Clearly.
Chair. So I will go back to the original mover and seconder of the original motion, which was Mayor Ganan and Councillor Bell. So with the exception of item number 2. So you are going to be moving technical report PD 27, 2023, proposed township official plan amendment number 65 to implement provincial changes, Bill 109, 23, and others, as well as information report PD 23, 2023, site plan and development agreement approval update. Are you okay with those changes, mover and seconder? Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so the clerk, there are 2 copies, obviously.
Yes.
There are several places around. So that amendment, or that motion should be amended, and a friendly one, I would hope, that says that they will be changed to item 2 and 3 on the clerk's agenda of this evening, because on mine, I don't have it that way. I want it to be known that there's two versions, and it's based on the clerk's agenda numbers that she has just read out that we are voting on, not on mine.
Okay, so are you just stating that just for statement? Because the way how the vote went was based on what the clerk had in front of her, because that's also based on what I had in front of me. So how it actually played out is the very same request that you're asking now. So you're just clarifying that you didn't have it presented that way.
I want it on the record that it was based on the clerk's agenda, because as my colleague has subsequently pointed out, we voted on something that is different than the agenda we have in front of us. So I don't mind that it's got to be clarified or why it happened. I wanted simply to make sure we were using the correct documents and the correct items, because the technical report on the zoning bylaw is much more important that we get it right than the update on the 2 pieces of legislation that are going back to staff for further writing. So this is a very important thing that we get it right for the applicants.
Yeah, and just to be clear, again, the item that was voted on was actually the very thing you're saying, which is it would be based on what the clerk had in front of her, because best to her knowledge, that was before everybody else. So the misunderstanding, rightfully so, is that you guys had it in a different order. Actuality, it was in the correct order, which is the way it voted, so it doesn't actually change the outcome, but we can make the comment mentioned in the minutes if it'll make you happy. So I think, so then now we need.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, I'm going to bring up the pulled item for Councilor Rayner, who we was speaking with earlier. I don't believe we carried that yet. So I know we had Councilor Rayner and Councilor Bell as a mover and a seconder, but I don't believe. So I'll pull that up to vote, so it's clear.
And to be clear, can you just state that it's what's in front of you, right? Okay. Go ahead.
So with just all of that, can we be very clear that when we're voting on it, that the numbers were incorrect and that they
That's what
need to
was just
also be
recorded.
matched?
Yes.
All right, just to clarify that the original reason for Councilor Rayner to bring it up is
Yeah.
because the file numbers didn't match.
I had no idea everything else was screwed up. I just thought the item number was.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
so
the
I just want to clarify that before we vote again, so.
Yeah, that was clarified.
But it still is how and why this could happen.
I don't know.
How can you reverse this?
On 2 versions.
I know, it's weird. Oh, okay.
Your mic's still muted unless you.
Okay.
Again. So it's coming up to vote. It's just. That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, because in the beginning, it sounded like the file numbers were wrong, but it had nothing to do with that. It was just at a place. More of a technicality than any real issue.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So moved by Councillor Rayner, seconded by Councillor Bell, that technical report PD-22-2023, application for zoning bylaw amendment, 5623 20 Mile Road, file number 1601-011-23.
Thank you.
Does everybody, can I open it up?
You good? Okay, so now the vote will be in front of you, hopefully. All right. Excellent. So that should come up.
What's wrong?
Oh, it just takes a moment. Yep, that's showing up there. Okay, that carried. Thank you for that, and hopefully for those who are watching at home, hopefully you're able to follow that a little bit. If not, feel free to call me or message me, and I'll give you a clear explanation. All right, so we're going to move forward to staff reports. First staff report up here. Let me just bring my screen up here. All right, so it's item P4223, and it's that a recommendation report PD 2423 regarding review of secondary unit policies and regulations dated May 8th, 2023 be received, and that staff be authorized to commence a review of the township secondary unit policies and regulations and initiate an official plan amendment and or zoning bylaw amendment process if required to implement any proposed changes. So I need a mover and seconder for that. Got Councillor Bell, Mayor Ganan. Any comments or questions? Not seeing or hearing any, so we'll go right to the clerk. Who are we waiting on? Who? Councilor Rayner, are you, There you go. And that carried. We're going to go to item P43, 12.2, yeah, 40, last one was 4223, this one's 4323, and it's a recommendation report, PD 25-2023, regarding proposed provincial planning policy changes dated May 8th, 2023, be received. And that the Township Council endorse the comments in this report to be forwarded to the province as the Township comments on ERO postings. Those numbers are 0196822 and 0196813. I need a mover and seconder. You got Councillor Braderick and Councillor Bell. And I'm going to go actually to our staff here to speak a little bit to that. Go to Mr. Hayworth there, Manager of Planning.
Good evening, Chair and committee members. So this is quite a large report, as you can see. We're covering off 3 provincial changes. As the committee is aware from past reports, and actually the reports on this agenda, the province continues to make changes to planning policy and legislation in support of building more homes faster. So further changes are proposed under Bill 97, which are Planning Act changes. And Attachment 1 provides a summary of those changes and staff comments relative to some of those changes that you can see. So some of the more specific ones that I'll highlight for you now, beyond what's in the report, are requirements related to refunding fees for a decision that's not made in time on a planning application. That timeline, as we've talked about before, has been changed from January to July 1st. And this is better, and staff have been expecting this date. But the date in our minds should really coincide to be when all provincial land use decisions are made, all provincial changes are made. Because we're operating in a state of flux. Under Bill 109, we have timeline requirements, and we're going to have to meet those. And as Brian talked about earlier, it's going to be very challenging when we have continual changes to provincial legislation and policy. So our comment back to the province would be, make that date when you're finished making all your changes. There's also the concern relative to a change in the Act which corresponds to policies that I'll talk about in a little bit, which is allowing two extra residential units, and that includes agricultural areas. So we're concerned about that, and I'll talk about that in the policy piece as well, relative to, private services, although that'll have to be met, but it becomes very difficult to deal with those changes in additional units, especially in light of the aspect of adding potential lot creation in the agricultural area as well. The other piece of legislation that's changing is also positive in one respect, and that's a regulatory change. As you know, under Bill 23, they took away our opportunity to place a residential building of 10 or less units under site plan control. So what they're doing now is establishing a regulation where we could put some of those residential buildings with 10 or less units under site plan control if they're in a certain proximity to a rail line or a shoreline. Our comments back to them are, this is an improvement, but could you please define what a shoreline is? Are you talking about a lake shoreline? Are you talking about a river shoreline, right? So they could clarify that for us. As well as if you're taking that philosophy about using site plan control to address different matters related to a rail line, which is like usually a compatibility issue, a shoreline, which is hazard issues, then why would you not apply that for a residential building of 10 or less units in proximity to a manufacturing operation or within a natural, but adjacent to a natural heritage feature where you can then enforce the recommendations of an environmental impact study, right? So that's our other comment to them on that regulation. It's an improvement based on exempting all residential buildings of 10 or less units, but you could go further. So then we get into the changes to the PPS. So I should go back. So the Bill 97, the comment deadline was last Friday. So the comments that you see as attachment 1 in our report, we've submitted to the province as staff comments to make the deadline. The deadlines are different for each of these pieces of legislation. We can make the deadline for the regulatory comment and the PPS as council comments, okay? PPS is a summary of basically what they're doing is taking the provincial policy statement and the provincial growth plan and combining them and streamlining them. And what I would say in general, as a general comment, we're in support of streamlining provincial policy. That's great. It makes our job easier if it's clear. And we have to deal with various policy documents. Greenbelt Plan, other municipalities have to deal with the Greenbelt Plan and the Niagara Escarpment Plan. We don't have to deal with that. And they're all a little different. It makes the job much more difficult and more complex. So we're in favor of streamlining, but not at the expense of comprehensive planning and being able to build complete communities properly, which I feel this legislation is taking a step backwards relative to that. So there's what they're doing in terms of growth management, they're eliminating the growth allocation schedules. We'll have to still comply with the regional plan, but the PPS will be different. It'll change. And there's a huge timing issue here. These provincial policy statements, we don't know when they're going to get approved, but probably fairly soon. They've left off the natural heritage policies for review, so they're still going to make changes. We don't know what those are. And I'm in favor of streamlining that and making it clear, because the Greenbelt Plan, natural heritage policies is different than the growth plan, which is slightly different and more distinct than the PPS. So that could be improved, but that is coming when some of the provincial policies will be changed as a provincial policy statement. They won't be, it looks like the timeline for implementing them is going to be the fall to give us time to digest them so we don't have heartburn over them. But we also have an official plan conformity deadline of November 4th, and then we have a timeline for regional proclamation, which is going to be in the winter of 2004, sometime at the earliest between January and March. So we're going to have to comply with the regional plan and likely have provincial policies that are going to be more flexible than the regional plan when we have to comply with it, because the regional plan was based on the existing PPS and growth plan. And we're going to get pressures, and we're going to get pressures for urban expansion, et cetera, which I'll talk about. The urban expansion policies are more flexible. They're not as comprehensive. The issue of needs not there in the same manner. Still would require an amendment to the regional plan and ours, but the provincial policies would be more flexible, and people will go to that and use that. There's no affordable housing policies specifically in the plan. Affordable housing, there is a very brief policy that's mentioned with other policies, but there's no affordable housing strategy. We all know affordable housing is very complex. Multidisciplinary, there's no strategy in this document. There's more flexible policies related to employment land and employment area conversions. Typically, an employment area conversion would have required a municipal comprehensive review. That's no longer necessary. Still would require an amendment, but again, the policies are more flexible. On employment land conversions, so employment land conversions for employment lands that are outside of a core employment area, which receives higher protection, those employment lands, there's other uses that can locate in those, and our policies cannot be more restrictive. We're not allowed to be more restrictive, and that's an important point as we go to agriculture. So the agricultural severance policies, as Brian talked about, would allow the opportunity to create 3 lots off an agricultural parcel that existed as it stands prior to this year. There is some criteria, like you're supposed to be adjacent to a non-farm use, but we've had a lot of retirement lots in the township of West Lincoln up until 2005. So there's a lot of those lots out there that would be considered a non-agricultural use that you could locate other lots adjacent to. So we see a huge impact on agriculture, and we don't support those policies. And there's a specific policy that we're not allowed to be more restrictive in this case, which is very concerning. And then I kind of talked about the timing already. I think that it's going to be a very difficult challenge as we move forward with these changes, and the timing of when the PPS would be coming into fruition or implementation, when we have local conformity, and when there's proclamation. So those are all spelt out in the report as well. So I hope that gives you a little summary.
Councillor Rayner.
Thank you for the presentation, Dave. Through you, Mr. Chair. With regards to agriculture and the potential of the 3 lots on the land, you said the retirement lots. Well, McGinty shut that down in 2005. But are you telling me that they will bring it back? A legitimate farmer would have the right to have a retirement lot plus 2 others on it if he meets the requirements as a farmer? Is that kind of the strategy they're going to bring back to justify it? Or you mentioned if there's still retirement lots. I thought those retirement lots were a done deal. People have built on them. They're long finished 18 years ago.
Right. Through the chair to Councillor Rayner. So what I was speaking of is the proposed agricultural policies, if you have a farm parcel that existed prior to this year, and you come in and you can meet the criteria in the policy, one of which is adjacent to a non-farm use, you can potentially create 3 lots adjacent to that non-farm use, whatever it is. It could be an old retirement lot from prior to 2005. So they're not bringing back retirement lots, but what I'm saying is because we have so many retirement lots out there that were created prior to 2005, that creates the opportunity for those 3 other severed lots off an agricultural parcel.
Through you, Mr. Chair, you mean previous approved retirement lots prior to the 2005 deadline that have not been built on or built on?
Built on.
Oh, so as long as they were built on in their retirement lot, you're then allowed to add beside it?
That would need clarification, I would think. Probably they mean built on, but they don't get that specific.
Through you, Mr. Sorry. Through you, Mr. Chair, the provision talks about having to have some sort of an existing non-farm type situation. So I'm not even sure it would need a retirement lot necessarily, but it's not clear exactly what they mean by that. The situation that we were talking about in confidential, the person with the small holding does not have any lots on her property that she owns, but across the corner, there's a small lot. So it's possible that might be enough for that applicant to get lots. We're not clear on that provision, but the reality is that any sort of a non-farm use could generate the possibility for them to create 3 more.
Okay. Your mic's off.
Oh, I'm sorry. When do you figure this clarification will come through? Because right now, it's very cloudy, muddy, whatever you want to call it. Based on what you've seen so far, have you got an idea, month, 2 months? When do you?
Through the chair to the councillor, that's difficult the province has made changes. They've approved Bill 23 while they still had the comment period open. So it's difficult to determine when they're going to approve it and what refinements they will make based on consultation. We don't know. I would say that given the fact they've made the comment that they're looking that the fall would be when they want to be able to say you have to start implementing this now, that it's going to happen over the next couple of months anyway.
Good. Okay, so I have Councillor Trombetta.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hayworth. I'm kind of confused because I know it's a lot of communications back and forth. So just use me as an example. I built on a retirement lot. Are you saying that now they'll create 2 more lots adjacent to my retirement lot that I built, 3 more adjacent to me, that the farmer will have an opportunity to build because I built on the lot that was severed in 2005?
Through the chair to the councillor, that would be an opportunity because you would be an example of a non-farm use out there that those 3 lots could be adjacent to. The policy I specifically cut out and put in the report. So the actual proposed agricultural policy is in the report. There are some other criteria that frankly are a little vague. You have to meet MDS, of course, that kind of thing.
Oh, that will never, that's for sure, because they built a barn back there, so I'm okay there. But so I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around it. So if the property was purchased while it was severed as a retirement lot and new owners bought the property, it still doesn't, they can apply to do this afterwards?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, through the chair to the councillor. So if there's an agricultural parcel and it exists, as it existed prior to this year, so there hasn't been any other severances offered or anything, and they come in and it goes around a farm retirement lot, right? Okay. And they have enough frontage they could potentially sever 3 other lots off, rural residential lots. There are some other criteria that you have to meet, but there is the potential out there for a lot of lots.
Okay.
And
just
my understanding is we have a lot of farm parcels that are not necessarily owned by farmers out here.
Yeah.
And so it
And
creates
just-
the opportunity for a lot of lots.
One through you, Mr. Chair, and just help me sleep tonight. And what's the setbacks for major dairy? What's the setbacks for, MDS setbacks for major dairy?
You're talking the MDS 1 setback for a house?
Yeah.
I would assume it could be around 1,000 feet or so.
Okay, I'll
but-
sleep tonight. Thanks.
But so, Mr. Chair, just to be clear, as Dave mentioned, the actual policy set in this case is in the report, but it starts by saying any lot that existed on January 1, 2023 is entitled to the following. So it doesn't matter what the history was. You can start over and create your 3 lots. So.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other, oh, go ahead.
I just want everybody to sleep well. I mean, this is still out for comment. It hasn't become legislation. And the other thing was that this was supposed to address the continuity of a family farm. So when it comes back, I would really like that our comments refer to the fact that this was done. We acknowledge that this was done to keep the next generation on the family farm. So I'll use my example, since Councillor Trombetta is not going to sleep, and that is that where does the next generation find a place to live if there is no house other than the one that the current occupants occupy? And so that was some of the discussion behind it, and I would hope that that comes to reason as we move forward, and we're not objecting to the fact that perhaps 1 lot might be appropriate, but 3 is excessive, and we're not looking for the opportunity to sell and divide up farmland. So personally, for the farmers that have come to me, who have had trouble trying to find houses for their next generation, just happened down the road from me, they were struggling like heck, it's to try and keep these major farm dairies out there. So let's not completely poo-poo the whole idea. It's just sounding a little bit, perhaps it's out there in its greatest extent, and it'll be controlled and brought down to 1. Let's hope that.
I don't mean to belabor things, but, the history of retirement lots was meant to be for the retiring farmers, and we all know how well that proved over the years not to happen most of the time. And once it's conveyed, it's hard to control the ownership of it. So I'm not sure exactly what will become of this. You're right. It's policy as proposed at this point, but your comment is noted about the family continuity.
Perfect. Well, and hopefully the province will not do what they did last time when they asked for feedback and basically discarded it all and just did what they wanted to do the Monday after. So, all right, not seeing any other questions or comments, I'll go to the Deputy Clerk for the vote. All right, so that vote's coming forward. That carried. Thank you very much. So now we move to other business. Item P4423, Manager of Planning Dave Hayworth. Request for proposal, Parks, Recreation Trails, Corridors, Master Plan, verbal update. Manager of Planning, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Chair, and to the committee members. Just an update, we had a Parks and Recreation Master Plan and a Trails and Corridors Master Plan. So we're updating those because we are going to grow and basically double in population over the next 30 years. So we want to start planning for what facilities we need over that 30-year time frame because of the population growth. And that's in terms of parks, in terms of recreational facilities, trails and corridors. So we're combining those. We are looking at trails now because of the Transportation Master Plan did such a good job on trails and planning for trails. We may not have to address trails as much as we originally thought, but we're looking at getting requests for proposal out over the next couple of weeks. It's probably about a 6-month process to complete that plan. But we think it'd be very beneficial. It's going to help with development charges and capital, forecasting and budgeting as well.
Perfect, thank you. That was a verbal update, so I'll go on to the next item of business. Director of Planning and Building, Brian Treble, and its consolidated bylaw on the township website. Another verbal update.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the township planning staff are working to make sure that the bylaw, the zoning bylaw that's on the website is current and up to date. It got a little bit ahead of us, and so Shrada has been working to do a consolidated text and mapping document, and hopefully within the next couple of weeks it will be updated. Shrada has announced to us that she's moving on to another career job in the city of St. Catharines, so we're going to miss her, but I'm hoping she's got it done before she goes, and then we can have an updated zoning on the web.
But congratulations and good luck. Thank you. All right, so that brings us to item P4623, which is members of committee, other business matters of informative nature. I'll start to the left. Councillor Bell, Councillor Braderick, Councillor Trombetta, Deputy Clerk, Madam CEO, Madam Mayor.
Just a reminder that this Friday is the Age-Friendly Advisory Committee's presentation of the Anti-Fraud Seminar by the Tom Cheel from the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, 9:30 in the morning at the Community Centre, and we hope to see many of you there. And if anyone's watching, please spread the word. We need to inform our community about what's going on out there and how to protect themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chichik. Nothing. Councillor Rayner. Nothing. I guess I'll just end by saying, I guess in the last week there, I was able to attend the Faith Fair at St. Martin's School there. I think the mayor was there in the morning. I managed to get there right at the last 5 minutes. Didn't really get to see much of it. The timing wasn't relayed to me accurately, so I missed most of it. But from what I did get to see and get to experience, it was really well done. I know that the public news came out that the Smile Cookie campaign was successful. They got 25,000 Smile Cookies. They hit their goal there. Not Smile Cookies, but the dollars.
$25,000, right.
Yeah.
And additionally, the food drive is still on until this Friday, but currently we're just over 9,000 pounds of food.
That's amazing.
Through the food drive, and still going. So if people haven't made their donations yet and wish to, they'll happily receive them.
Perfect. And that's all I got to mention, I believe. So, no, I'm assuming there's no items of new business. Not seeing or hearing any. So I'm going to adjourn this meeting at the hour of 9:01 p.m. Have a great night, everyone.